So the general answer of how we connect the distal parts, the arms, the hands, and racket to the body is form, the form of our arms in the swing. And so we start with a certain form at the beginning, if we're a more advanced player, by holding the racket in two hands like this. But the average recreational player immediately basically destroys this connection by splitting their hands, taking the racket straight back, and now my hitting arm is disconnected from my body, and I tend to swing, you know, this thing on my own, trying to make good contact. Now, it's different for the tennis players with the two-handed backhand, because now we have a built-in form. Now this is like a triangle that I'm holding the racket here, and I hold onto the racket the whole time, and the form of the arms remains intact the whole time. So now the swing of these arms and the racket are much more in sync with the rotating body. And this is the reason, my primary reason, why most players at almost all levels who have a two-handed backhand is the more consistent shot than their forehand, which is quite often gets disconnected from the body's rotation. Now, leaving aside the recreational tennis swing, the linear splitting of the hands, and moving on to the more advanced rotational swing, we have options. So, you know, at the simplest level, even when people generally try to take it back with both arms, and even in the out in drill that we worked on, I saw a few examples where people were still standing too vertical, too stiff. And so this tends to make this whole process too much of a merry-go-round, too flat and horizontal of a swing pattern, simply because the way we've sort of organized our body in this vertical manner. So in all the lessons that I'm talking about, we have to get in this athletic stance where there's hinge from our hips 30 degrees, so we can rotate around this axis and use the rotational capability built into our mid-back and spine, thoracic spine, that is. And in the Bruce Lee swing lesson, we talked about how this general motion, this upward throwing motion, is very similar to an uppercut punch in this manner. And you're not far off in general form if you're swinging the racket for a topspin forehand in the same manner. But even that is we need to go a little bit more refined than that, and that's where we're getting to the spiral engine, the spiral swing. So as opposed to just a low to high swing up in this Ferris wheel sort of plane like this, what in fact we see is a much more complex movement. So there's much more dips and curves to that movement. So if I take it up here and then I side bend, now my body is bending, and when I start out, I'm starting out more of an outward path than this uppercut. It's more out here, more of a spiral up around here. And then as I drive up and my left side rises and pulls through, and then my right side comes through and hitting, I make contact here with my front side out in front, but then I'm not just making contact, I'm imparting spin in this windshield wiper form where my hands are pronating, my forearms are pronating through here. And so instead of just rising straight up, we're actually pulling down on our left side. And we often see that this left arm, as we've been talking about, tucks in down here lower, not above the shoulder, but lower, because the form is coming around in this spiraling action. And generally, that's the spiral engine that we're talking about. So in terms of connectivity, it's not only connecting us to the right swing path, but it's connecting us to the right movements of the hand and forearm automatically. So if we have the right form of our body in the spiral, as we side bend back and we lower our shoulder here, then this racket naturally drops into the slotted position. We didn't have to take our arm and consciously move it, just our body moves it there. And the supination and things that we've been talking about, the laying back of the racket, also tends to happen on its own, just by the form of this turn of the body. So the forearm is rotating and the wrists are rotating, and as we fold back here, this wrist should be left to feel free, so that as we move our elbow from drawing the racket back to drawing it in, the racket head swings back and coils deep in our wrist position. So we're storing all kinds of energy just by folding back and letting this racket swing back. All of this is stored energy that we're going to release in our swing. So we're connecting to the flow. Our body in the spiral form is connecting to the flow of our racket and racket head. This is what I'm demonstrating here. We're not doing anything too consciously. I'm just letting the racket kind of flow around me in a pulling motion, and it's assuming all the right positions and loading positions. So furthermore, as we come out of the slot, we have to do some things to make good contact. So you've seen this position. I'll show it from the point of view. We're back here in the slot, and now we're starting out here, but you notice my racket strings are faced almost down to the ground, and my racket head edge is very close to the ground. So we're going to have to get the racket head from this position to almost this square position at contact in less than a quarter of a second. So again, how can we do that given that this action is so fast? Well, the body's spiraling motion, if we let it flow and extend out into our hands, the twisting of the racket, the torquing of it that's going to turn the racket in this position up to this position will flow out into our hands, and we will just let this turn. As we come up and turn, my arm is pronating right into contact, bringing this to square or almost to square. So the exact timing of this rotation is taken care of by this spiraling action, just like this. And the timing and everything is taken care of by the correct form of the spiral. If we don't have the spiral, it's going to be very difficult to make good contact. And then because we are coming inside out in this windshield wiper motion and brushing and driving through it, and we're pulling with our left side, then as we get through, then this racket will pull down and stop with our left shoulder so our hitting side can go through. But as we pull down, the racket's going to come down into our left and end up somewhere down here. Sometimes it's over the shoulder, sure, but more often than not, it's almost always a pull back and down position. So we don't just swing up on this Ferris wheel plane, but we swing on a spiral, and our body is a spiral engine. Forehands. Let's look at this jack sock video, and now that I've highlighted the spiral motions of the racket, that's where we'll focus this first video clip on, is the racket motion, and I think you'll clearly see this spiraling action. I'll play